So a little while ago, a commenter on one of my more recent videos asked me for some advice on a build he was considering. He made some interesting choices, and I saw there were some areas where he could optimize on both performance and costs. So I thought I'd do a video on it. Anyways, here's my thoughts on this particular build. First thing that I saw was he picked the 9600X for his CPU. And so he'll most likely be CPU bound in a decent number of games, especially if he uses it in like 1440p, like high settings and above. The 9600X is a decent CPU, but for gaming, especially at ultra settings at 1440p and up to 4K, it'll have a hard time keeping up with the GPU. The NZXT Kraken Elite 280 RGB, although it's a decent AIO, it's really overpriced. It's out of stock right now, but at the time that he asked, it was in stock, and it's hyper overpriced. I mean, $270 for a AIO is pretty high, especially since Thermalrate has a lot of good choices on both air and water cooling, and they're really cost effective, not to mention they perform just about as well, if not better, in certain scenarios. The motherboard, the MSI B850 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi motherboard, is a fine pick. There's nothing wrong with that. It'll have most everything, if not more than everything, that most gamers or PC builders will need. And it's pretty decent price at $170. Your alternative would be like a B670 or something like that, if you could find one at a similar price range that offers a little bit more. For the RAM, the RAM is insane right now, and Corsair is taking hyper advantage of it. Their prices are almost twice as much as other prices, but the availability is shrinking on these 32 gig kits, the 2x16 kits, especially at the 6,000 mega transfers a second level. These kits are really starting to get really hyper inflated right now. So, if you can source it locally to save yourself even $100 to $200, then, you're better off that way. Another way to look at it is if you're looking at 16 gig kits or even a single stick of 16, and you can get it for like $100, $125 or something like that. 32 gigs is better because it keeps you future proof, and if you're doing productivity workflows and things like that, then 32 gigs comes in really handy. But other than that, for the most part, 16 gigs is fine for RAM. The 990 EVO 2 terabyte Gen 5 SSD isn't a bad pick. Samsung makes a pretty great product. I try to stick in the region of somewhere between $50 and $70 per 1 terabyte for an NVMe. If you haven't checked it out yet, I did a video a little while ago comparing Gen 5 versus Gen 4 SSDs, and there's really practically no difference in performance that most people will see unless you're doing a lot of file transfers. Now, he picked the 5070 Ti GPU, and I put the MSI Ventus right there because that was the best priced one right now at $730. But you are paying a premium for a card from NVIDIA that sometimes gets outperformed by a 9070 XT. The 9070 XT right now is going for about $600. The Height White 70 Infinite, the Touch Infinite, is a good looking case. It's a great looking case, but about half that price is what you're paying for that screen. The Y70 without the screen is right now, I think it's selling at about $180, right? And so if you like the size and nature and look of the case, and you don't necessarily need that LCD screen, you can save yourself about $180. The power supply is a good pick. I like MSI's power supplies. They're usually pretty cost effective. and 1,000 watt will somewhat future-proof them for future upgrades. And so that's a pretty decent pick. And as you can see, the parts that he picked isn't going to be $2,000. It's going to be at current market prices. We're looking at 2,600 and change. After promos and discounts, it comes out to be almost 2,600. Pretty big premium for a build like this. We can certainly save $170, if not more, on the AIO. We could probably find a 32 gig kit that's selling for about 200, 220, maybe 250. All right, so let's call it 150 in savings for the memory if we stuck with a 32 gig kit. And we could probably save about $30 on the SSD, and we could save another $130 on the GPU with the 9070 XT. And we save another $180 if we stuck with this case, but didn't get the LCD screen. That's $180 in savings. So we're looking at about a $660 savings overall. And this is just without really doing a whole lot of research. In a second here, we're going to take a look at how we can build this out and maybe save even more money. So we got pretty much the same performance at a much better price point. And maybe we take some of that money and we put that back into the CPU and bring that up to like a 9700X. If he's primarily doing gaming, the 9800X 3D, or even the 9900X, which costs a little bit less than the 9800X 3D. It doesn't perform better than the 9800X 3D in gaming, but it does pretty well. And at the same time, if you're doing productivity stuff and creativity stuff, I'd rather use the 9900X than the 9800X 3D. And that's about $100 less right now than the 9800X 3D. So let's take a look and rebuild this with what I would get. All right, so we're keeping a couple of the essentials, the motherboard and the power supply, and obviously we need an operating system, although we could probably save some money there if we were willing to go on the gray market, but me personally, I'd rather not. And if not, you can get a free Windows just by installing it and not activating it, and it works just as well. I just can't do personalized settings, which I don't really need. All right, so we're going to do the CPU last on this because we want to see where what our cost is versus that $2,000 that he wanted to spend versus the nearly $2,600 that he was going to end up spending. CPU cooler, if we wanted a 360 with a case like that, you can get a 360 and it'll be actually a little bit better performer. The Frozen Warframe is pretty interesting from Thermalright. Let me see if I can find that here. So as you can see, it comes with an LCD panel for system information on the pump. It's currently going for 75 bucks. We're going to go with a white build because he didn't say, but let's just do a white build and see what we can get out of that. Memory. All right, so we got some interesting stuff right now. You see how a lot of stuff is going out of stock. Our best price looks like for a CL36 6000 megatransfers is the Patriot Viper for a 32 gig kit. But there is a Kingston Fury Beast at $260, so that could save us $140 right there from the Corsair one. It's a black kit, but at the same time, are you wanting to spend another $140 just for it to be white? So let's change this over to a black CPU cooler. And for storage, so here's a 2 terabyte Western Digital SN3000 for $120. All right, so that's saving us more than that $30 I was thinking. And let's get the 9070 XT, ASRock Challenger 9070 XT. And for the case, I think we're gonna go with that Lian Li Lancool 207 digital. which is going for less than 90 bucks right now. And so that'll give us the LCD screen, which can provide, you can program it to provide system info and things like that. It's a good looking case, and it saves on desktop real estate, and it's almost $300 less than the other case. All right, so that's how I would build this out. And so right now we're sitting at $1,600, which for us to stay in that $2,000 range, we can now pick a CPU. You can get the 7800 X3D for $373. So that's not a bad pick if you're primarily gaming. But if you're going to do more than just gaming, which I imagine most people will do more than just gaming on a PC, so I'm going to go with the 9900X, which is just under $400 right now. And there we go. We're at $2,000. And so now we've got a lot more solid system with this build. And of course, there's other things we can do. We could do things like the 9700X. We could get the Peerless Assassin air cooler, which is one of the best air coolers on the market. It actually outperforms a lot of AIOs. Let's see what we can do with the motherboard. We want Wi-Fi on it. The B650 is the same chipset as the B850, and here's an MSI Pro, and that saved us about 50 bucks right there. And we can't do much better on the SSDs, and unfortunately right now we can't do much better than this if we buy retail. But you could potentially find, like I said before, on Facebook Marketplace for about $150 a kit like this. So let's change that to 150. By the way, I know some of you might point out that, well, he wanted CL36 and this one's CL40, but that's not a whole lot different. You're not going to see a difference without, you know, actually doing synthetic benchmarks or tracking your frame rates. And even when you're tracking your frame rates, you're probably not going to see more than about like 2 to 3% difference, if that. We could bring this down to about like $60 to $70 if we're willing to do just 1 terabyte, but 2 terabytes is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. GPU will keep. We could go to a cheaper case, but there's no reason for it. So we're just going to keep this case. Technically, we don't need more than a 750 watt power supply, but let's go with an 850 watt power supply and see what we can find. MSI product right there for 80 bucks. All right, so now we got 9700X, and so technically this will perform just as well, if not actually slightly better than his original build, and our price is now less than $1,600. So as you can see, there's all kinds of ways to save money, even in this market right now, where you don't have to pay an arm and a leg for a decent build. And this kind of build right here, that'll probably last you a good 4 or 5 years, if not more, without even having to upgrade. So as you can see, there's lots of ways to skin a cat when it comes to building a PC and getting the performance you want without overspending. And in today's market where things are getting kind of out of hand, saving without sacrificing performance is even more important. So hopefully you found this helpful. And if you like this video and the information I provided, and if you would like me to do a video with some advice on your build, hit that like and subscribe down below and comment with the build you're thinking of, and I'd be happy to have a look. Thanks to Libram1407 for asking me for advice and giving me a reason to do this video. And until next time, thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one.